Before we begin, I'm getting the plug out of the way. If you want to see episodes early and support the show, go to the Patreon, link below. The sources for this video can be found in the linked Google Drive document down below. As well, I use the term GamerTM throughout, and I want to clarify what I mean. I am not talking about people like myself who enjoy a large number of video games and play them a lot. I am talking about a group of people who have constructed their life and viewpoint around a consumer identity. The type of people who will defend a corporate entity's heinous treatment of its employees, or get quite angry and harass developers for including trans people like myself. And for complete clarity, I know what these spaces are like because I spent time in them when I was a teenager. Many of my not-so-great friends at the time were gamers TM, and I had some of these views, actually. Then I grew up and learned to love myself. My hope with this video is that it will both help people who are outside of that group better understand things, and to broaden people in that group's understanding, however limited it is currently, about what the art form of video games is. In last month's video, we discussed how designers manipulate you in order to induce specific feelings and experiences, and I said this: but as I hope this graph will show you, players of different skill level will need different levels of difficulty in order to have the designer's intended experience. So let's talk about the other day, I saw these tweets from one Colin Moriarty.
If you can't or won't beat video games on anything harder than easy, and you're reviewing them from that perspective, and not from the perspective of the average player, then your criticism is worthless. Seek out critics who actually like video games. It's all getting a little trite. Some say worthless was too harsh a word. I agree. So let me phrase it like this. If you're reviewing games on easy, you're not playing the game as intended. Game criticism is aimed at a core audience, not casual audiences. Thus, if it's not the thesis, that review lacks value.
I want to be clear that I am using Colin as an example, seeing as he is a well-known and popular video game reviewer, but that this is not about him as an individual, and more a general aspect of gamer TM culture, one which his tweets exemplify. I want to highlight two interesting ideological views expressed here about game design and art analysis. Firstly, it states that experiencing games on harder difficulties inherently has greater value, and is inherently the more important experience that should always be prioritized when discussing games, and that specific audiences are inherently more important. Secondly, it states that many gamers, as evidenced by Colin's following, believe that authorial intent is everything when it comes to how you play and experience a game. As you probably know, if you've seen my video on Tron Legacy, I don't agree with that position, but for the purpose of my argument, we're going to entertain it being true and see where it leads us. Authorial intent, self-explanatorily, is the experience and meaning of a work that the author or authors of said work intend the audience to have. Colin's argument here is predicated on an idea of who the audience is, and does not take into account that different audiences will experience different difficulties differently, and that authors of games may be less restrictive in who they view as a valuable audience. If I, as a designer, want the audience to be in a flow state while playing, I'm going to have to adjust the difficulty for different players. Let's bring back that plot of flow state. Let's say that I first designed the game with a hardcore player in mind, here represented by player B. Then someone like player A is going to be having an anxious, miserable time, which is not the intended feelings for this game. So I add in difficulty settings, which allow player A to have the same experience as player B. But let's say there's some hypothetical player C, one who has abnormally high skill at the game, then it also applies in that direction. the game is intended to feel a specific way, and it doesn't have higher difficulty settings, it will bore players with more skill, like player C. The thing is, gamers, TM, are often perfectly okay with people modifying the game they are playing by adding additional rules, so it's harder. Challenge runs, various types of speedruns, and mods are often used to add difficulty so that higher skill players don't feel bored, and curiously enough, this argument about authorial intent disappears when we discuss increasing difficulty, especially in ways blatantly not intended by the creators, unlike direct difficulty settings. Many speedruns actually involve breaking the game. Unless the creators actively add in modes like this, there is no way you can argue it was intentional. So, Colin, and every other gamer TM out there, do you think speedrunners are bad because they don't experience the game as intended? I highly doubt you do. So adjusting difficulty in ways the creator did not intend is not the problem to them, clearly. Maybe the actual issue is who it's adjusted for. If you have spent any time in online gaming as a marginalized person, I think you'll know what I mean by who gets prioritized. When Colin implies that easy modes are something imposed upon creators, that they don't do willingly, that it's not their intent, while also stating that all analysis must be aimed at a core audience, he's giving the game away. Gamers, TM, like Colin, do not believe that casual, lower skill, and disabled audiences are valuable audiences. He can mask it in statements like casual, but I know plenty of disabled players who are definitely hardcore, but need certain difficulty settings because of their body not being able to respond when it comes to certain games. Disclaimer, I have no idea if Colin understands this is what he's saying, because the thing about dog whistles is they're designed to be repeated by people who are unaware of them, and ideological beliefs can be held without awareness. However, whether Colin intends to or not, he is using the massive platform he's built to tell his audience that disabled gamers do not have value, and that a reviewer is wrong and the review lacks value if it's aimed at any audience other than the one he wants prioritized. As well, reviewers are meant to tell people if a game is worth getting. If you only make reviews for elitist gamer types, you are a niche reviewer by definition, and saying everyone else should serve the same niche as you is a fundamentally flawed view, one which game designers and companies would not want, as they are trying to get as many people as possible to buy and play their game. So even from a capitalist market perspective, one that Colin, a libertarian, would support, making games more accessible makes more sense. And the companies would want players who do not exist in the niche market of hardcore gamers to know that their games are accessible. So, reviewers who cater to that have a market value. By the very logic of Colin and gamers TM, they should see the value of reviewers who serve different audiences. On top of this, not all creators agree with gamers TM on this, including many game designers. Take Celeste, for example. Celeste is an extremely difficult game that has a variety of optional, easier difficulty settings that adjust how the game plays. These settings were lovingly handcrafted by its designers so that gamers of all skill can have the same experience. Because the designers consider disabled players to be a valuable audience worthy of their time and not an afterthought. They could have very easily prioritized hardcore gamers, TM, only. But they didn't, and the game was better for it, and the intended experience was had by more people. Now, some of you are likely going to bring up competitive PvP as a counter-argument to having accessibility settings and the relationship to difficulty settings, but the reality is, we adjust difficulty in PvP all the time by having ranking systems and automatic matchmaking. PvP games could easily add specific modes where everyone has specific accessible settings active, such as aim assist. And many already do. You may not understand that that is one of the purposes of ranking systems, but the reality is the designers intend for players to have a competitive experience against players of similar skill, so that all players can experience flow state, rather than lower skill players having anxiety and higher skill players getting bored and both groups leaving the game. Some games even include handicap settings to facilitate this, like Super Smash Bros. so players of different skill can have fun playing together. Fundamentally, there is a disconnect between the people like Colin and many video game designers in their
ideology.
I first heard the following phrase from one of my professors: difficulty settings are accessibility settings. When you set out to design a game, yes, even extremely difficult games, with a priority given to accessible design, you have to think about difficulty settings. As shown by the graph, not all players have the same experience as each other with the same difficulty settings. The problem is, if you dislike engaging with critique as being subjective and believe in objective critique, then you cannot acknowledge the above stated simple fact. Many privileged people love the myth of objective review. I'll be doing a video on what objective, subjective, and intersubjective are, the different philosophical frameworks related to them, and why it matters in art critique later. But for now, we're just gonna continue with you experience art subjectively as a truism, as that's a whole video in and of itself. So, when you do not engage with the reality that your experience of art is different than others, you understandably will not understand why disabled gamers and many non-disabled gamers require difficulty settings to have the intended experience, or just want those settings because they find it more rewarding. Not all designers and players value the same things and may have a different ideology when it comes to game design. For example, Daley Kong, a designer at Platonic Games on Twitter, said,
"For the record, my ethos as a designer is to think about making my work enjoyable and rewarding. Those things can be achieved without things needing to be needlessly difficult for you to feel rewarded. There's a lot more to it than analog difficulty. I will always think about the player having the worst time with my work, and I strive to figure out ways to make my work as not frustrating and broad reach as possible. I'd rather cater to everyone than a small subset of elitists. That's just my 2 cents.
I think the fundamental disconnect is that for certain gamers, like Colin, the only reward, or the most important reward they place value in, is overcoming certain types of analog difficulty. The greater the difficulty, the greater the perceived achievement is in their minds. I wonder if they think Sword Art Online is the peak of what gaming should be. Anyway, many designers agree with Daley, myself included, and do not view games through such a simplistic lens. Often people will say things like, games should be fun. This is a similar ideological statement about what a game is and what it should be. I would argue that a game doesn't need to be fun. It just needs to be engaging in some way, and that way can be negative. For example, Pathologic. If you've ever seen H-Bomber Guy's 2-hour piece on it, you know that it's not fun. It's actually actively, purposefully unfun, but was deeply engaging for him and many other people, and has been touted by some as one of the greatest games of all time because of how it's not fun. I think the restrictive ideology of gamers like Colin that believe games are and should be only one thing to be deeply anti-artistic expression. I think that games can be valuable in different ways, and that difficulty settings can actually add new experiences for players of all skills. Minecraft's survival mode is generally considered to be its primary mode, but many players, especially artistically minded ones like myself, also love playing in creative and just building. What makes it engaging is not difficulty in any way. As well, creative mode is much more accessible for certain players, who may find the crafting systems confusing, or the combat unenjoyable, or the resource collection to be a waste of time, but who do love building in it. The lower tension makes the game more enjoyable for them. I think the easier difficulty mode of being invincible and having any block you want in creative adds a drastically different, but for me as enjoyable, if sometimes more enjoyable, experience of Minecraft. Minecraft also has a hard mode where if you die once, you are permanently dead and lose all progress. While I do not find this mode interesting, there are many players who do. The added tension makes the game more engaging for them. Adding extra difficulty modes based on challenges that communities made themselves has become more common in design as time went on. The developers of Dishonored 2, for example, considered speedrunners while designing levels.
So there were a lot of decisions built around how are speedrunners going to interact with this map.
I am certain many gamers can recognize the value of designing with various players in mind when we discuss speedrunners, but this understanding seems to disappear when it comes to designing for lower skill players. If we apply their logic, though, the game should only be designed with those speedrunners in mind. Players who are likely more skilled than the majority of gamers, TM. What I didn't show in that quote is the line before that statement.
For 99.9, how many other nines you need, the layout is designed so that what you do first is purely based on what you want to do first, or just like where your curiosity takes you. For speedrunners, definitely Jindosh first, Sokolov second. That's the 0.0001%.
They may have made design decisions for those higher difficulties, but the priority was people who are not the elite gamers. They considered how players of all skill levels would approach the level. Creative mode, an easy difficulty in many ways, allowed me to access the parts of Minecraft I enjoyed, creatively expressing myself with building. Speedrunning, an added hard mode, allowed certain people to access the parts of games they enjoy. Challenge and the development of greater skill expression. Both are in some cases intended experience, and neither has inherently greater or lesser value. Let's say, hypothetically, that the part of a game you enjoyed was the story and puzzle mechanics, but due to disability, the gameplay for combat was too difficult for you to physically be able to execute what was needed. What harm is being done to any hardcore gamers by adding a completely optional invulnerability mode into the game for you to be able to experience the aspects of the art you would like to experience? Absolutely none. But when an optional invulnerability mode was announced to be in Psychonauts 2, because Double Fine's design ideology is that all people should be able to play games, many gamers, TM, were extremely angry about its existence. First off, another example of accessibility options being the designer's intended experience, and secondly, this option has no effect unless you decide to activate this mode. It is completely optional. So, why are they angry? I think an aspect of it is that many gamers define their identity within their capacity to accomplish things, and they believe, falsely, that by other people getting to experience what they feel they earned without earning it, it cheapens that aspect of their identity. When people's identities are under attack, they get defensive and lash out. I think they're also placing the cart before the horse with what difficulty means to the feeling of accomplishment and satisfaction. They believe that because they experience satisfaction and accomplishment from achieving a goal with a specific difficulty, everyone will have the same feeling of accomplishment with the same difficulty. They think the level of difficulty on its own is what provides satisfaction, and not their relationship to the difficulty. Someone who has higher skill will not feel satisfaction at that level of difficulty. Likewise, at a lower difficulty, they would not feel satisfied themselves. But for a lower skill player, or a player who is not physically capable of doing higher difficulties, they will feel satisfaction at a lower difficulty. Fundamentally, by having well-constructed difficulty settings, you allow players of all types to experience that satisfaction, the intended experience. As a small kid, I needed easier difficulty modes to be able to play, and those modes gave me a lifelong love of games. If I did not have those options, I would not have gotten to the point where I enjoy playing hard games like Dark Souls. There are games like Diablo 2 and 3 that are designed to train players to get better by having adjustable difficulty that goes up over time. And, if players want, they do not have to move on to the next tier if they are not ready. Lower difficulty settings are important in training players to be able to play harder difficulties. Accessibility means all people should be able to play games, exactly like Double Fine said. If invulnerability is the option that allows for more people to play video games, that's an incredible and awesome thing. I want other people to get to enjoy my hobby and art, so invulnerability modes should be in games, which benefit from it. And gamers, TM, instead of being angry about disabled gamers, casual gamers, and younger gamers getting to enjoy video games, you should focus on learning how to understand that other people have different experiences than you, and enjoying the aspects of games you enjoy. Or, Keep throwing tantrums and making an embarrassment of games as an art form, but mostly embarrassing yourselves. It's your choice, really. I can help you change tired moments into pleasure. Say the word and we'll be well upon our way. Blend and balance, pain and comfort deep within you, so you will not want it any other way. Not enough, I need more. Nothing seems to satisfy. Don't want it, I just need it. Breathe to feel to know the line. Knuckle deep inside the borderline. This may hurt a little, but it's something you'll get used to. Realize